Hello, I'm Dr. James Bogash, Master of Health and Longevity and creator of Modern Health Myths. And today we're going to revisit the topic of asymptomatic transmission of COVID-19 based on a recent study that was just published in Nature magazine out of Wuhan. I've certainly addressed this concept before, looking at the available research, and had pointed out that asymptomatic transmission is not really that everything that we think it is, because that's really the fear, right? Is that I may not know I have it, but I can pass it on to grandma or somebody else's grandma and wipe out the planet that way. And it's also the rationale for wearing a mask, is that I'm wearing a mask to protect you because I may be asymptomatic and not have any idea, and so I'm going to wear a mask so I don't infect you. Well, that relies heavily on the idea that there is asymptomatic transmission, or that it's really a big thing with COVID, and then it also relies on the whole mask thing being effective. And I just posted a video yesterday talking about the data isn't as strong as most people seem to think it is. But this particular study was took place on Wuhan after the lockdown. So Wuhan, obviously the center of the epicenter of all of this madness, locked down from January 23rd to April 8th. And so the government, after things opened back up in middle of May, so like May 14th to June 6th, undertook a massive testing campaign to test almost everybody in Wuhan, up to almost 93% of the population, which included almost 10 million people, to see what happened to the virus after the lockdown and when things started opening back up. And they found that there were no symptomatic cases after that, but they did find 300 asymptomatic cases. So basically, these people were positive on PCR testing, and that's the whole jam the Q-tip in the back of your skull testing. And these 300 people did not have symptoms, but they tested positive. They then followed up with almost 1,200, so 1,174 contacts. So these are the people that had been exposed around these 300 asymptomatic positive people. So these are the people that would potentially catch COVID from an asymptomatic person. So out of the almost 1,200 people, how many developed, turned positive testing? 0. Not a single one of the almost 1,200 people that were exposed to the 300 asymptomatic cases turned positive. Now, this isn't a giant sample. I mean, the entire sample is. 300 is not that large of a number, but it certainly continues to suggest, along with prior data, that asymptomatic transmission, if it occurs, is at a very low number. There have even been some researchers that have suggested that if asymptomatic transmission does occur, it may breed other, it's not the right word, but may breed other asymptomatic cases, so that those people never actually become symptomatic. So, again, and keep in mind that other studies that have looked at asymptomatic transmission didn't look at actual transmission. They looked at the potential for asymptomatic people to kick out viruses. So in other words, just because we can find genetic material doesn't mean that these people can infect other people. As a matter of fact, in this Wuhan study with those 300 people, not a single one of them were they able to find and culture an active virus. So there just wasn't any way that these 300 people could infect somebody else. So just because we have we find viral materials does not mean that it can infect somebody else. And that's been the failing of a lot of other studies, is they just looked for particles. They didn't look for the ability of that virus to cause the presence. They didn't look for the presence of the viral particles to be able to cause infections. So that's been the failing of a lot of these, or some of the other studies that have looked at the whole asymptomatic transmission scenario. But as always, this just boils down to the fact that most of what we're doing is probably not doing what we think it's doing, and we need to take better care of ourselves and exercise and eat right and do everything else that I outlined in my seven video series on taking care of your immune system during the pandemic. So as always, I will make sure I leave a link to this study in the video description. Make sure you share this video with somebody who you think needs this information, and subscribe to the channel.